Okay, since it is 7 o'clock, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Welcome Housing and Human Service Advisory Board members, and a warm welcome to all of our guests. Thank you for joining us this evening. So we're going to start with public invited to be heard. Nicole, are you aware of any public?
So we have Jessica Collins, who is joining us. She is interested in possibly serving on the Housing and Human Service Advisory Board, and part of the recommendation is they sit in on a meeting if they can. So Jessica, if you'd like, you're welcome to unmute and say hello.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm the exec at the Longmont Y, and know Eliberto and a lot of you fine people here in this group, and just looking for another opportunity to serve. So thanks for letting me listen in.
Terrific. Thank you, Jessica. We're glad you could make it tonight. Okay, then let's go ahead and approve the minutes from the October 8th board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Graham. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Deanna. Okay, any discussion, corrections on the minutes that anybody has? All right, all in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by either raising your hand, or if you are not on video, saying aye, but I think we have everybody on video. Madeline is giving us the #1 sign with her index finger. So
I got her. I'm getting her
all right,
renamed
awesome.
right now. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I was watching everybody's hands and missed it. So thank you to whoever let Madeline in. I appreciate that.
Yep, no worries. I got a little
waiting
pop-up,
to
so I went
start.
ahead and let her in.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so I show the minutes getting passed, including Madeline saying aye, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And it looks like Karen is joining us.
Oh, there she is. And
Karen
Polly.
Phillips.
Got it.
Polly. Welcome, Councilmember Christensen and Karen.
Thank you.
All right. I've been standing in the cold for 2 hours distributing boxes, so my mouth is even less functional than typical. So you'll have to excuse my stumbling over anything. So let's move on to our next item, which is our presentation from Imagine, and thank you for being here. We're looking forward to your presentation. So this is on the 2021 CDBG application to both the Human Services Advisory Board and our colleagues on the TRG. Is there a lead? Laurel, are you taking the lead on this presentation, or Patty, is that you?
Or does staff have a intro? Kathy or Matt or Molly?
Oh.
No? Yes?
Kathy is unmuted.
I don't know if Molly does. I think we got one application. This is it for now. We're going to have to open up again first quarter of 2021 because we have more funds available. But we wanted to at least move this one forward so they have some certainty of a yes or a no once we get to that point. So
great. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, Laurel and or Patty, whichever one of you is going to start, just heave ho.
So we're going to tag team a bit. My name's Patty Micklin. I'm the executive director of the Imagine Foundation. And essentially, this is the fundraising arm of Imagine. So we write all of the grants and do the private fundraising. I want to thank you all for reviewing our proposal, for being so helpful in answering our questions in the process. And also, I want to say thank you for the funding that you all provided as a city to the Charles Family Smart Home when we built this home. I believe it was 11 years ago. We are really excited for this opportunity. And one of the questions that we got today to make sure we addressed, I thought I would go ahead and address right now. And that is along the lines of the mention of a drop in revenue in our proposal to you all. I know it'll come as no surprise to you that the pandemic changed the funding landscape for every organization and business and even individuals, and Imagine was not immune to that. During the beginning of the shutdown, we were able to bill the state for what they called retainer billing, services that we were not able to provide, but that ended at the end of June. And when our new fiscal year began July 1 and the state completed its legislative session, our provider rates, along with every other service provider for people with intellectual disabilities, was cut by 1%. And so that was a significant cut in our budget, and we wanted to do everything we could to preserve our services, because services are not gonna, the needs are not gonna go away for people with intellectual disabilities just because there's a pandemic. If anything, we've had to be very creative in how we've delivered those services. So that combined with the knowledge that our annual gala that happens at the end of January and is going to be a virtual event is going to be a much lower revenue, as well as many other situations that we knew were on the horizon, including continuing to have to close services for periods of time as COVID spikes, as it's doing right now, caused us to put forth a budget that is 8% lower than last fiscal year. So I wanted to address that right up front, but we have a very firm commitment, the foundation does, to all of the homes that Imagine owns. And so at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Laurel, and she is going to walk you through the presentation, and I am going to attempt to share the screen. So let's see if this works. You all see an opening screen. Yay! I will just tell you that Laurel has been with Imagine for 11 years, and she's the director of our residential services and knows these homes inside and out.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to meet you, and thank you, Patty. Yes, I'm sorry, the technical difficulty is mine, so thanks, Patty, for bearing with me while I work through screen sharing. So what you are looking at right here is a picture of the Charles Family Smart Home. In addition to the Charles Family Smart Home, Imagine owns 13 residential properties and 2 administrative buildings. 5 of our residential properties are larger group homes, and 8 of those properties are typical single-family homes. And these homes are located throughout Boulder and Broomfield counties. 3 of the homes that we operate have HUD funding, Housing and Urban Development, and we maintain a reserve account for each of those homes for ongoing maintenance and appliance replacement, which happens very frequently in these larger homes. We used HUD reserve funds to renovate the kitchen and bathroom in one of our group homes in 2018 at a cost of $75,000. And last year, the Imagine Foundation used funds to renovate the Bob and Judy Charles Smart Home. It was a kitchen renovation, 2 bathrooms, tile flooring at a cost of about $200,000. Of the homes Imagine has built, the oldest was built in 2000, and it is one of our group homes in Boulder. Our most recent build was in the city of Broomfield, and that was completed in 2014. And we can go to the next slide, Patty. Okay, so the Imagine's Charles Family Smart Home is located in Northeast Longmont off of Pace and 17th and was built in 2010. It is a 3,500 square foot home with 6 bedrooms and 2.5 baths on the main floor, and it has a live-in apartment in the basement as well. What you're looking at here is the interior of the home. The home is equipped with lift tracks and widened hallways and accessible bathrooms to support individuals who ambulate primarily using wheelchairs. The kitchen itself has a sink and an induction stove that can be raised and lowered to support accessibility for meal preparation for the people that we serve. The home has remotely controllable lights and blinds and a heating system that individuals in the home can control without direct physical access. And you'll see a really nice example of this later in a video that will show of how this really opens up sort of a world of possibility for the people that we serve. Within the home, we utilize the newest technology to support people with physical accessibility and independence, including we use Alexas and Google Home systems, and those can be controlled from switches on an individual's wheelchair. And this allows a person with little to no mobility to control their surrounding environment and request support using those buttons when needed. The home is equipped with solar hot water heaters that reduces our energy usage. Okay, next slide. So what you are looking at here is sort of the pride and the joy of what we do. So these are the people who live in the homes. They're the reason we all work so hard and get up and do what we do every day. Each of the people that you see here has a robust social life, education and work life. They have dreams, and our job is to work in the background to support these people in accomplishing their goals. We work to promote self-direction and focus on what the person's stated wants and needs are to drive our supports. The physical accessibility of the home itself and maintaining a well-kept environment is just so important to the people we serve and their success in life, which is part of the reason why we're here. We take a lot of pride in managing homes that look as well put together as they can look, in our point of pride for the people that we serve. We're going to go into a little bit more detail here with a video about one specific person who lives in the home to give you a sense of how the home environment itself can help support somebody on their journey to independence.
Shelly has a very fiery personality. She's very sassy, and that's what I like about her. She likes to kid around, but she can also be very comforting to you as an individual, and know if you're not feeling that great, she understands that and she wants to make sure you're okay.
Shelly moved from an institutional facility to Charles Family Smart Home. When she moved here, the only way she could communicate with us was with her eyes. She would look up for a yes and down for a no. What is your favorite color? Purple? Yes. So her communication was limited to just saying yes or no to a question that we asked.
Is that a little bit better? Okay, cool.
Before, it used to be she would kind of just get really upset and kind of try to get out of her chair and just be very upset about it, which is very understandable.
We knew right away that it was going to be imperative to get her a more sophisticated means of communication.
Ready to set your Dynavox? All right, let's do it.
Shelly usually uses a clicker on her head, and she chooses certain images, and through those images, she can communicate and tell people what she likes, what she, wants.
My name is Michelle, but I like to be called Shelly. I use my Dynavox to communicate my choices every day.
She didn't have a voice when she came to Imagine. She just had her eyes to tell us yes or no. And now she has a voice. Literally and figuratively, she has a voice now. Right here? Instead of us staff training people and saying, hey, by the way, Shelly likes this or that, it was Shelly independently telling someone, hey, this is me, I am Shelly.
It is important for me to be an advocate for myself and for people like me. I am a woman who is proud of her independence. I enjoy being seen for who I am, not for my disability.
Do you want that? This? She loves wearing makeup and looking good.
My Dynavox works well with Alexa. With Alexa, I can be my own DJ. I get to listen to the music that I want when I want to listen to it. Alexa, play Nicki Minaj.
Angel away, you're strange in a way. Maybe that is why I chase strangers away. They got their guns out aiming at me. But I become Neo when they aiming at me.
Hey Siri, FaceTime Chris Bogart.
Whoa, hey, Shelly, what's up?
What's up?
Just out taking a stroll.
The interesting thing is a lot of these smart home technologies that are available to the general public that we use for convenience sake actually has made a considerable difference in the lives of a lot of our clients, because for us it makes tasks more convenient. For them, it may make the impossible possible.
Alexa, turn off the lights.
Oh, Shelly's really adventurous.
She is no stranger to danger.
We took her skiing and she loved it. The rest of the guys did one time down the mountain. She did it twice because she was so excited to do it.
We're always so happy to provide anything that we can for people if we know that it's something that they want or need. For Shelly, in her future, I hope that she continues to surpass every possible expectation that we could have. I hope that she continues to challenge me in keeping up with her.
When people see me, they may see my wheelchair first. But when I look in the mirror, here's what I see. I see a woman who is proud of her independence. I see a woman who likes Nicki Minaj, but no one can touch the rhymes that OG Shady can drop. I see a painter and an artist. I see a woman who can watch Magic Mike for days. I see a woman who loves shopping on Amazon, and to whom you probably shouldn't give your credit card. I see a woman who will never pass up a perfect caramel frappuccino. I see a woman who never leaves the house without looking absolutely fabulous. Other people may see someone with a disability. I see a woman who is absolutely unstoppable.
So sorry, it takes me a minute to always catch up after those videos. So that's Shelly. That's one person in particular that we serve. We serve her in this home, in the Charles Family Smart Home in Longmont. She has lived there for almost the entire time the house has been open. And it was her first placement outside of the first place she lived outside of a state-run regional center. So it's really important to us that she be able to experience her community and her home life in a way that is really meaningful to her. So Patty is on to the next slide. Okay, so Shelly's story, and then okay, so now I'm going to go into my screen. Will shift over into the nuts and bolts of the projects that we are proposing. And I believe you have some of this information in front of you, but it's also on the slide on the screen. So we propose to replace 2 furnaces in the home. The furnaces have been routinely maintained, but they're starting to show wear and tear that will require replacement within the next 1 to 2 years. They're original to the house, and they've reached about the end of their lifespan. We propose to replace the original marmoleum flooring in the laundry room. It's a type of nearly indestructible flooring that we've managed to destruct over time. It has begun to crack and separate at the seams, and we've had really great success with tile in our other homes. So we would like to replace the marmoleum in the laundry and kitchen with tile. The next project is also a flooring project. We have hardwood floors throughout the common areas of the home. So the hallways and the living room and the dining room, and they are also original to the house. They've been around 10 years and seen a lot of wear and tear and a lot of foot traffic. So the wood itself is in good condition. They just need to be refinished at this stage. The next project, I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around a little bit from your sheet if this is the order that it makes sense to me, is remodeling 2 bathrooms to repair, and the primary reason for that is to repair leaking. So for those who are sort of structurally inclined in the group, there is a waterproof barrier under the tile in the floor. And with the weight of most of the people that we support in the bathroom, it's the staff person supporting them and the person in a shower chair, and it gets a little heavy in there. So the weight of that during shower time has sort of cracked the waterproof barrier, and it has begun to leak through the joists in the basement. So what we need to do is we need to sister the joist in the basement, prop it all up, re-waterproof, re-tile, and put that all back together again. As part of this, we also propose to replace the cabinetry in the bathrooms. It's an MDF, multi-dimensional fiber, MDF-based cabinetry, and it just doesn't do very well in the humidity of the bathroom. So they've begun to fall apart over time. And the last project that we propose completing is recarpeting the live-in basement. So the live-in basement we rent out to direct service professionals who work for Imagine, who work for our organization, who may struggle to find housing, especially for a single person, 1-bedroom housing can get cost prohibitive in this area. So that's what we use that apartment for, and the carpeting just needs little help. So those are the projects that we proposed, total of $6,600 or $66,000. The estimates we have from doing similar past work in other homes, we've had to remodel bathrooms in another one of our homes in a very similar way. So we know the work that is involved. And we've done similar projects in the majority of our other homes. So we have a good understanding of what they cost and have gotten bids for things that we are not aware of the costs for. So those are our projects. Okay, next slide. Thank you, Patty. So the last part is I'm done explaining our project and a little bit of what we do. And I would love to take questions from you all so you have a better understanding of what we do, what the money would be used for, things like that.
Great, thank you so much, Laurel. Questions from the TRG members or our HHSAB board members? I'll start with one. Sandra, please.
I'm with the TRG, and I have a question about your wait list. Based on the information that you have given us, what is the length of stay of a person living in one of your smart homes?
Sure. So the individual, Shelly, who we saw the video about, has been there for about 10 years. Our most recent move, that person has lived there for about 3 or 4, 5 years. Yeah. So I would say average length of stay is probably 7 years at this point, but the home was built 10 years ago. So it's hard to say what it will be in the future.
So do they stay there until their health changes or they pass on, or is that forever home for them until maybe their health changes?
Yeah, it's forever home for the most part. We we try to narrow our focus to people who need 24/7 care, have intensive medical or behavioral needs. A group home is really well suited for people who need constant rotating staff. And so if at some point somebody doesn't need that level of care, they've improved, they want to live in a smaller setting, we'll absolutely help them find that. But for most of the people who live there, they'll have the medical or behavioral needs to live there for the rest of their life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. Any other questions from either board? Diane?
Yes, hi, Diane Groff, the Center for People with Disabilities. I'm curious as to, I was trying to track it, thank you for sharing the other property information. And then, yeah, and that's great. And can you talk a little bit more about the reserve fund and specifically for the Charles Smart Home?
Sure. So HUD requires that we put a certain amount of money annually into a reserve fund for each of our homes. The total reserve fund amount for our 3 HUD homes is about $56,000 right now. And then we actually submit a similar grant process through to HUD if we want to access those dollars for any of our homes to make sure it qualifies with their guidelines as well. So when we renovated the kitchen at the Foothills Group home, we did a similar process and completely drained their reserve account that they'd been accumulating for about 15, 20 years. So we drained their reserve account to do that project. And we are just working to build up the reserves in our accounts for the 3 homes at this point.
Thank you. Anybody who's not on video, if you have a question, you can unmute and I'll see that you've done that and you can just speak up or I'll call out. Laurel, I have a question that's more, so 2 questions, not specifically related to this request, but really more general. How many adults or individual clients are you able to serve at this time between all of your properties? And what about your operating income? Where does that come from?
Sure. So Imagine Residential Services total serves about 160 people. We serve them in a variety of settings, some in independent apartments, some in host homes, some with their families. In the homes that we specifically own, in the 13 homes that we own, I would say there are probably about 50, 60 people in those homes altogether, just in the ones that we own, not that somebody else owns or if they live with a family member. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of your question?
I was wondering your revenue for operations, where that comes from.
Sure. So the vast majority of our operations revenue comes from a Medicaid waiver. So the individuals receive funding from Medicaid as part of being on the DD waiver, developmental disabilities waiver. We also receive funding. Most of the individuals we support have Social Security, and we charge a room and board amount, and the state dictates how much we can charge their Social Security funds for a room and board amount. So we also get funding.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Councilmember Christensen?
Not a question so much as just a comment. I did tour one of the Imagine homes with Leona Stucker quite a few years ago, and I was very impressed with just how thoughtful the physical structure and design is. It's using universal design, which is something we all ought to actually use. It's more expensive to construct initially, but it makes many, many things much easier. You can move furniture around. You could also move people who are in wheelchairs around a lot more easily. And that the physical needs of that building in order to provide better services for disabled people are considerably more expensive. For instance, my outlet or my fuse box, whatever, in the basement is about 2 by 3. Their fuse box, they have 2 of them in the basement, and it's like 6 feet by 4 feet each, because there's so many different needs electrically. So I just wanted to put in a word for how, when they're trying to improve things like the tiling in the floor, if you have probably a wheelchair going over linoleum, it's not going to last very long. You really need ceramic tile and things like that. So it is more expensive. It looks like it costs a lot more, and it does, but that's what's needed to provide a comfortable and a thriving kind of environment for people who have fairly profound disabilities. And I'm very impressed with I love the video you showed of Shelley. I can't imagine not having a way to communicate. And the fact that now she does is really speaks well for our society. So anyway, I would encourage anybody who wants to go take a little tour of the Imagine Homes. Thanks.
Thank you, Council Member. Any other questions or comments for our guests? No? Okay, so Karen?
I have a question. So it's back to the, the capital reserve. So you have, the amount of revenue you take in is dictated in terms of how much you can get from, Social Security. And so I'm just wondering what the plan is. I mean, does the foundation help to raise money to help with the capital reserves? Because because the homes are well lived in and probably need more maintenance and replacement than typical homes. So are you going to keep coming back here time after time? So I just wondered what the plan is, given that you do have restrictions on how much you can be able to take in to help fund a capital reserve.
I'll jump on that question, Karen. So the Imagine Foundation actually, this is our 20th year. For the first 15 years, we were raising money to build those 2 smart homes and to purchase 5 other residential sites for Imagine. The Imagine Foundation is definitely highly committed to maintaining the properties as well. And that's been a new movement that the foundation board has made in the last year or two, which resulted in last year's $200,000 renovation of the Bob and Judy Charles Smart Home in Boulder. Honestly, our plan this year was to begin a sort of savings account or a quasi-endowment, if you will, for home maintenance repairs for the residential services program. And our hope was to be putting $20,000 to $30,000 a year into that, so that over time, if one of the houses ran into trouble, they wouldn't have to rely on their operating budget to have covered that. They'd have the foundation dollars. This year with the pandemic, honestly, Imagine has asked the Imagine Foundation to be as flexible with our funding as possible to really secure services. Medicaid dollars do not pay for any capital improvements. So that's one of the main reasons the foundation was started 20 years ago. But this is a year for us to really raise money to make sure that our services stay intact and that people don't go unserved. And so, when Laurel and I were talking about this presentation tonight, and she was giving me more of the background of the residential services budget, in order for us to create a break-even budget for Imagine this year, even our maintenance services were kept to bare bones. So when we saw the opportunity for CDBG funding through the city of Longmont become available, we were absolutely elated at the possibility that at this point, where we are in the pandemic and where you all are in managing this funding, that it might be a perfect synergy to support each other in you being able to help us make these renovations. But I want you to understand that the Imagine Foundation has a very strong commitment to being able to create reserves so that we don't run into big challenges. The wear and tear on these homes, as you all know, is heavy because most of those wheelchairs are electric wheelchairs, so they weigh a ton. So the amount of money that Laurel has in her budget this year for maintenance actually will probably need to go towards some appliances that need replacement in those homes. And that is, I know, not something that CDBG funding is available for. So it's my job to look across the universe and find every opportunity for funding that we can. And we are looking to you all in sincere and grateful hope that you can help us make this happen for these 6 individuals. And we also know there's a challenge with COVID. I would love to give you all a tour of the Charles Family Smart Home. We've actually closed it to the public for obvious reasons. But when it reopens, we would love to extend that opportunity again.
Thank you, Patty. Karen, do you have any other questions? So could I get a little guidance from staff on are we being asked to make a decision? Is this informational? What's the process from here?
So you are not asked to make a decision tonight. Actually, the TRG is going to go back. Oh, can't see me.
The top of your head looked great.
Did it? Yeah. A new haircut. So the TRG is going to meet, I think it's next week, maybe Wednesday, to discuss this further. We'll follow up with any additional questions that we might need to do. And then they will put forth a recommendation, which we will bring to the Housing Advisory Board at your December meeting.
Okay.
So, so speak now or forever hold your peace if you've got questions or something else you want us to explore from the applicant. But yeah, the TRG will be meeting again to discuss in more detail.
Great, thank you. Caitlin, did you have a question?
I do, and this probably comes from a bit of a place of ignorance about it. I noticed that one of the things is replacing furnaces, and it's been about 11 years. Is that a typical, I don't know if that's a typical lifespan. That sounds short for a home furnace. I feel like I often hear 15 to 20 years, but I'm not sure. So I'm curious if you have more information about why that is.
Sure, that's a good question. We tend to see 10 to 15 years out of our furnaces. And to be honest, I'm not sure if that's because they get used so heavily, especially in our group homes. They're just heating a larger area. Or the reason that we have a maintenance supervisor, and the reason that he brought this to me is because we've had repairmen come out over and over and over and again to put, patches and fixes, et cetera. And their sort of final say is, you've probably just reached the end of this particular furnace's life. And I wish that I had more information. I'm not entirely sure if that's a standard lifeline for your furnace or not. But I know that we tend to budget that we're going to have to replace those every 10 to 15 years.
Thank you.
So one of the things we might be able to do, because we partner with them on our residential rehab program, is work with Energy Outreach Colorado. And a lot of times they can provide additional grants on heating elements. So we'll have our rehab specialist check in and see if this might be eligible for that too, which would stretch the dollars further.
Great.
Great, thank you.
And as Kathy pointed out, this is the opportunity to quiz our guests from Imagine. So any other questions? Diane Groff?
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity, reminder. So I've been sitting here, and Patty or Laurel or both, can you take us through the process of what a major rehab to flooring and the impact on the residents and what the plan is? I mean, it sounds like you've had experience with the Boulder home. So what does that look like?
Sure, that's a really good question. So, and part of what I should be clear about is that this is not work that we could engage in while the pandemic is where it is. I know that these funding streams take some time to organize, which might be in our benefit here, but we can't have outside workers coming into the home right now. So I want to be clear about that. But these projects, none of them affect the individual's rooms. So the flooring, the wood flooring in the individual's rooms has stood up over time because it doesn't have as much foot traffic as the common area floors, so they don't have to be replaced. And if that's the case, it makes it a little bit of a simpler project. We are prepared to move people out for a day and into either another home or facility that we have, or we've moved people into hotel rooms for a night or so in the past. But we are hopeful that we can work with a contractor who would be able to get in and out quickly in one day and work with us in that way. We retiled one of our group homes, Foothills Group Home in Boulder. Gosh, it was about 3 or 4 years ago now. And we did the bedrooms, the hallways, and we were able to coordinate with that contractor to do phases of the house so that we didn't have to move everybody all the way out, which is really important when you think about the idea that these people need lifts and things like that to help transfer out of wheelchairs and into shower chairs. So finding accessible housing for them even for a short period of time can be difficult. The community space renovations, the tiling in the kitchen should take a day and the laundry room will be fine. The bathrooms we'll have to section it off and do one bathroom, get it completely finished and do the other. And like you said, we just recently did that at the Bob and Judy Charles Smart Home in Boulder, and that was successful. It's a little bit of a pinch moving from 2 bathrooms to 1. But so long as everybody knows that it's temporary, in our experience, people are pretty patient and it works out well.
Great. Heather, I noticed you had unmuted for a moment. Did you have a question?
I do. Thank you. I had a question about the population at the Longmont home. I noticed you have one individual of Hispanic race, Mexican, and then 5 individuals that are Caucasian. Can you speak to how that is decided, if that plays a role in diversity, how the clients are identified that make a good match for this type of living environment? Just sort of speak to that.
Sure, that's a good question. So I think our primary concern when we're looking at people who need this type of care, because really in the state of Colorado, this is the step of care before you go to an institution, right? So this is the most sort of extensive level of physical care and staffing support that you can get in a community setting. So there are not that many individuals in our area who need that type of support. So we want to make sure that the people that we serve in this home really do need that level of support. And there's very, very few individuals who do. And there's not really any person under the sun in our area who has that need. If we have space available, we will serve that person because the chances of them being able to get service elsewhere are slim to none. So we want to make sure we prioritize that people who may not otherwise have an opportunity to live in the community can do that. And there has not really been, in my experience, there's not really been much of an opportunity to look in that population and have to really even compare to individuals that you could potentially move in a home. Usually it's somebody who we've known for a long time needs that level of care, and they're the person most in need of it, and we move that person in. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I guess my basic answer is it's such a small population of people anyway that very infrequently. Hi, honey. Sorry. That's my son. So it's very infrequent that we get more than 1 or 2 people who need this level of care, and they wind up waiting for a long time and then we move them in.
So I appreciate that. How would you source outside of a white sort of, a client, potential client? I mean, do you reach out to different types of groups, programs, sort of outside of the, kind of the well-known bubble of Boulder? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we reach out to all of the place where we're most likely to find people who need this level of care are regional centers. So what used to be called institutions, so state-run group homes, things like that. So we reach out to the Pueblo Regional Center, the Wheat Ridge Regional Center. There's a regional center in Grand Junction. So at least biannually, we're reaching out to the directors of all of those facilities to inquire if they have anybody who has that care need. So we actually wind up serving a lot of people who are not originally based in Boulder and Broomfield counties, just because of the need, because there are not that many people in the state of Colorado with this particular need. And it's sort of a niche that we fill for the state. So we do reach far and wide across the state of Colorado to find people who need this level of care and help move them out of a state-run institution into more of a community-based level of care.
Okay, and then I have a final question. So if someone were to come in that that spoke a different language, whether it's Spanish, German, whatever it is, how do you accommodate a potential client at that level?
Sure, we serve an individual at the Bob and Judy Charles Smart Home, and he came to us he moved from Puerto Rico to Denver to live with his sister. And it took them a long time to get into services. And he's a really intelligent guy. He's a very smart guy, but he didn't know very much English at all. So the first thing we did is we hired a bilingual position in the home. And then we inquired about his curiosity to learn English so that he could have conversations with his housemates who all speak English. And we've set him up with an English tutor. So for the past 2 or 3 years, he's been attempting to learn English. And we've also, he still attends a Spanish speaking church. So we do everything we can to help him engage with his community so that it's not just, well, you're here and we can help you learn English, but we really do attempt to help support his growth in his a community that he chooses as well.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Go ahead, Sandra.
I'm just curious about your bidding process for choosing a project manager or someone doing the construction. Do you have a list of people that are good and reputable and they do a great job and are also within budget?
We do. Yeah, we work with a lot of contractors. We run the 13 homes. So we have quite a few contractors for the variety of work that we're looking at accomplishing, that we have worked with, that we enjoy working with. And we form some really great relationships with those contractors over time. They enjoy working in the homes. It's a new environment for a lot of them, and we enjoy having them there. But I also know that the CDBG process is, I believe it's pretty prescriptive, and you need 3 bids a couple of times during the process. So we're happy to go out and get as many bids as is needed, and certainly always eager to learn and meet new contractors who may be able to do the work, as well as some that we already know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are any final questions, this would be the time to ask them. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and move on. I don't see any other questions. So Laurel and Patty, thank you for your presentation and for the video. And most of all, thank you for your work. It's really inspiring.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Really appreciate it.
Of course. And no, go ahead. It's okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks. And I was just going to take a moment to reiterate, I really like these joint TRG, HHSAB, this format, because I learn a lot from the questions that TRG asks. So I'm glad we could do this. So with that, Karen, where are we?
We are here. We're zooming. So I would say, and unless Kathy and Molly, if you have anything else for the TRG, any last words, any closing comments? Because then I think the TRG we would love to have you continue on with us, or you may go on to other things for the evening. Is that correct, Kathy, Molly?
Yes.
Oh.
I have nothing else.
Okay.
So you want to leave? Okay.
Yes, please.
She's got a project she's working on.
I have
for
a
me.
project I have to do tonight.
Okay, all right.
I need it tomorrow. So
You're
thank you to the
excused.
members of the TRG.
Thank
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
So then Brian and members of the advisory board. So Eliberto has a PowerPoint presentation that he is going to share and talk about. So as you know, we are involved in the funding process for 2021. We are reviewing proposals, we are preparing for hearings, and and very soon after that, we will be spinning the wheel, working the matrix, and figuring out what the scoring is and what ultimately is going to be our funding recommendations for the agencies that have submitted proposals to us. So, so I believe Eliberto talked about we made a few revisions, and so what we really want to do tonight is to present a draft matrix of weighting the proposals and scoring the proposals, and get your input and direction on that, because we thought we should probably do that before we got too far down the road, and so that we were making the decision on the model based on what we think is really the best way to approach it.
Terrific. Thank you.
So take it away, Mr. Mendoza.
Yes, thank you, Karen. That's a good intro. What I am looking for tonight is really guidance, direction on what in your packet you received a 3-sheet Excel spreadsheet, right? It has 3 active sheet worksheets in it, and the PowerPoint that I'm going to show you is taken from that, but we can always refer back to that spreadsheet for questions or thoughts or ideas. And again, my expectation for tonight is not, I mean, a decision would be great, but direction is definitely the most important piece needed. So I think I can share my screen, right? Nicole, I think that I'm good.
Yes, you should be good to rock and roll.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen
now.
Start with the presentation. There we go. All right. So we're gonna we've done this every year. I've brought before the board different funding matrix options. I must admit, this year I don't have as many options because I haven't had as much time to think and be creative. And so your feedback will help me if there are other options for me to consider. I've just there's been a lot of quite of other projects on the hot plate that I haven't had a chance to be as creative as I could be with the number of options. But I think the options I will present are a good place to start. So the first thing, we always choose priority limits for the priorities. Now we have shifted the priorities this year based on the human services needs assessment, and you will see the differences in those limits. So here is the 20. I put side by side the 2020 and the 2021 proposed priority limits based on the the human services needs assessment. It also shows what we had to spend in 2020 and what we have to spend in 2021.
So Eliberto, if I can just interject. So remember, we do have several board members that this is their first time around. So
Okay.
So you might have to do some additional grounding.
Right. So what the board does, and what the board did, actually not what the board in our, I think our September meeting decided what were our priorities in order. And so in 2020, you can see that food and nutrition, health and well-being were in the top 3. They're all important, but we do create priorities. And what we did is I brought this proposal saying, well, given that we have this amount, the 789 to spend, this is how I think we should break down how much of that 789 should go to our priority areas. One caveat is we don't control how much people or how much agencies apply and which agencies apply. So these are just guidelines. Since I've been around on this side of the grant application, we don't always meet these, but these help us create the individual limits as well. And we have used the individual limits more than we've used the priority limits. And I'll get into priority or individual limits in a second. But this is what these do. They help us set the groundwork for what our individual agency limits are going to be. And they reflect what the board's priorities are with this year's round of funding.
And it's also linked to the needs assessment.
And yes, as I mentioned earlier, this is out of the human services needs assessment. So any questions about these priority limits or thoughts?
So if I just try to paraphrase, the way that I look at these priority limits is if there was so many applications that we were maxed out in each category, these amounts are essentially how much we would be investing in each category.
Correct. That's exactly right.
But to your point, there aren't always so many applications in each category. So even though we have health and well-being with 131,000, we may only get 60,000 worth of applications. And then that leaves some amount we have.
And I will tell you that there's a lot of education and skill building agencies that apply. That is one that is typically overfunded, where there's not a whole lot of safety and justice agencies that apply. And and same thing with housing stability. It typically is underfunded because there's not a lot of folks providing housing stability. But this is, if we had in each of those priority areas enough applications to cover it, this was how we would dice it and say this is how much we're going to invest in these areas.
Thank you.
So again, why those priority limits are important is because we derive our individual agency limits from those priority limits. So all of these are 50% of the priority area limit. That's what we chose in 2020. The board could choose to go higher, go lower. I kept with what we did last year. And you see some of them aren't much changed. But this is so there are some agencies that usually apply for a lot of money and they score well. And depending on which priority area they fall, this is the limit that they could apply for. I can Karen, were you going to say something?
Or they receive.
Or that they can receive. This is the most they can
Not
receive.
apply for, but receive. Yeah.
Right, exactly. You're right. They'll apply for more than this, but that is the priority limit. And very few agencies hit this, but there's usually a couple of agencies that hit this individual limit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the only thing I would say to this is that because some of the funding has increased considerably in something like self-sufficiency, it does raise the question, 50% of that pot is a lot more than it was last year.
Yeah, you can see the difference, right? But that's not necessarily just about the pot raising. It's about where self-sufficiency fell in the human services needs assessment and where the board felt it belonged this year.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's both the pot increasing and the board's realignment of the priorities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Diana?
So along with your question, Brian, or your point, Brian, about self-sufficiency. So like the food and nutrition last year was 69 and this year it's 57. So that's 50% a pretty significant drop. I guess I'm just wondering if we have applications from people that we've routinely funded for higher amounts that are going to run into some trouble with this 50% for those areas that have dropped, or if that's really a non-issue. Do you have any idea from reviewing applications and sort of past practice for who we funded?
If I could take a crack at that real quick. Diana, I think the idea is that one of the first things we did was prioritize the areas. And so the fact that there's less money in, for instance, food and nutrition reflects the fact that it's simply a lower priority than it was last year. Or alternately, self-sufficiency is a much higher priority because of COVID and the impacts of it. So presumably, if we're clever enough that any of that actually works, it will have impacts on those agencies, but it won't necessarily. The benefits will still be distributed in the most meaningful way for the community at large. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, I guess I was just entertaining the possibility that, say, for instance, last year, we'd only funded, say, 1 or 2 organizations in food and nutrition, and one of those were 35,000, and they did a really great job with that money, which would still put us within the budget of spending 57 this year. Do you see what I'm saying? They wouldn't be able to get that amount. So I don't know, maybe I'm inventing a problem that doesn't exist. I was just curious.
So that 57 is individual. So the priority area, if we go back, there's 114,000. 57 is 50% of 114,000. That just means one agency. And the reason we put individual limits primarily was to ensure that because there are several agencies that apply for quite a bit of funding in the priority areas. We wanted to make sure that not one agency would take, the majority of funding if they scored well and they asked, because we don't control, and we've had this conversation before, we don't control how much people can ask for. I brought this up idea to the board, and the board doesn't think that's the way to go. So an agency could ask for quite a bit of funds and score well, and because our funding is focused on 2 things, scores and the weight, that agency could sweep much of that priority areas funding, leaving out other agencies who either didn't ask as much or didn't score as high, but still scored enough to be funded. So that's why this is in place.
There are some funders that do have a cap on the maximum amount that you can request.
Mm-hmm.
And we have chosen in the past not to put a cap on it. And this is really our alternative for just making sure that not any one agency can come in and, take the full amount that's available.
Yeah. Caitlin?
Yeah, I think kind of to your point, Diana, looking at the page that lists what the applicants are for this year, I think functionally we're really looking at limits in food and nutrition is where I see folks that are asking for more than the I may have skimmed it incorrectly, but those are the ones that I see that are asking for more than that. And in one case, at least, they're asking for significantly more, like 102,000 was the request for one of them. So it seems like most of the requests are well under this. And so this is really only going to affect like a really small handful of agencies.
And that's typically the case, Caitlin. It typically doesn't affect the majority of applicants. So yeah, that's typically the case. I think last year we only had one agency bump up against one or two agencies might have bumped up against the individual limits.
My question is like, why 50%? Like, was there a specific rationale? Is that sort of just a like, this sounds like a good number, or is there some logic
basically, yeah, basically last year I gave the board, I did it this year. I gave the board 25, 50, and 75% to choose from. And the board felt that 50 was a good number. So it could be lower, it could be higher. I think in my mind, the idea is, again, not to have one agency monopolize the funding from any one priority. I mean, if you wanted to spread it out even more, you could do 25% to 30 or whatever. That's why we chose 50. There's no mathematical rationale other than the philosophical rationale that we want to make sure that we spread the funding as even, not as evenly, but as fairly as possible between those applying in these priority areas.
And that's really an area. So if the board has some additional suggestions, if you would like that that percentage cap to be higher or lower, that certainly is part of the discussion tonight.
Graham, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if we're flexible enough that, you know, when all the scoring has been done and we see where the chips fall, if safety and justice, you know, has 10K left in the cap, we can raise the cap on another category based on requests and priority. I mean, because we want to spend all the money, right? Ultimately, and distribute.
We always
it.
do.
Yeah, yeah.
That's not been a problem, but
Right.
I as I recall, and Eliberto, Karen, you'll have to tell me if my recollection is wrong, but we have authorized, you know, said, okay, let's move funds from this category that is under demand into one that we're not able to meet the qualifying requests.
Right. Yeah, and typically education and skill building has been a big one where that happens, where because of the demand or the amount of applications that come from there, they tend to pull in funding from other ones, because we typically don't ever have enough to cover housing stability. At least the last 2 years, I shouldn't say typically, since I've been around, the last 2 years, housing stability usually never, even though we encourage, but they never get to their whole limit. We feel it's a priority.
And these are guidelines, like Eliberto said. These are intended to give us a framework for decision making. It doesn't mean we can't make decisions outside of this framework. We just have to have good rationale for doing so.
Right. And I'll remind the board that even then, the board can make decisions, but ultimately this is a council decision. We send our recommendations to council, and they have changed our, or have added or changed our recommendations. So we've got to be aware of that too.
Yeah. Okay, is this making sense to everybody? Just to reiterate, the 50% is kind of a gut check. And the way I look at it is, you know, were we able to fund the agencies that seem to be doing the important work to the extent needed to do that work with this kind of threshold? And if not, maybe we need to change it. If so, then, but I think it's a good place to start. As I recall last year, I felt like, you know, it allowed the distribution of wealth across a number of different agencies of different sizes and different requests, but also ensured. I think the Hour Center was one of the provocations for this, because they're a big agency relative to some of these others, and they could consume a lot of funding in one area. But I felt like they got an adequate amount of, they got a meaningful amount of funding to continue their work, but it left enough for other groups to continue their work as well. Not a lot of science to it, though.
Sorry, I had a 9-year-old come in. Sorry.
You're back up?
I'm back up. Sorry, I had to had questions from a 9-year-old. Any questions? Any more conversation on this? All right. Here's the big changes. Here's where there is the next piece is where there is big changes, and I put in a slide to kind of give an introduction to why the changes are. A big part of it had to do with the Human Services Needs Assessment. That changed the game, and as it should. This is why we do it. But that changed how I look at the allocation from it. And then the other big change is just a choice that Karen and I made, and we can talk about this as well. But those two things made change. One is Karen and I decided to remove the weights because there was, before you had weights on your questions. And this year we just said, you know, they're all important. It's too difficult to decide which is more important than any other question on your application. So that changed the total range. Then the other big change is we shifted how weighted points are awarded to the agency. In the past, with the previous Human Services Needs Assessment, the weighted activities they had were pretty broad and pretty easy to award individual weighted points to, so you could have multiple activities in one priority that would get a certain amount of points. I was telling Karen that I was racking my brains trying to figure this out with this new Human Services Needs Assessment, because its activities are very, very specific. So what we decided after much conversation and deliberation was, instead of adding specific points for each activity, we decided to just, if you do any of those activities in your priority, we're just going to give you a set amount of points. So if you look at page 3 of your spreadsheet, you will see where we ended up. I think housing stability gets 35 points, and it goes 5 points down from that, if I remember correctly. So that's how we did the weights this year. Instead of, in the past, we might give 5 points for an activity in any one of those, and some had more activities than others, and so it just got very complicated. So this year we just said, if you are doing something in this priority area and you're meeting one of these activities, if you're not, you won't get the points. But if you're doing any of these activities, then we will just give you the straight points. We won't break it down like we used to. Yes, Caitlin.
So are these points based on what we assess that they're doing, or what they apply under?
Typically they're
category that they applied.
Well, some of them don't always know which category they actually belong in. Typically is once we read, so this is something that Karen and I do. We read the application and we decide, okay, really what they're doing. They're saying, well, we're doing so, and I'll give you a good example. Sometimes safety and justice folks have said, no, what we're doing is self-sufficiency. But in reality, what you're doing is something based on a court mandate. And so you really belong in in safety and justice, not in self-sufficiency. Does that make sense?
Yes. What happens if someone is like legitimately doing two things from two different priority areas?
So in the past, what Karen and I have done is what is their primary activity or their primary mission? I don't know if you want to add to that, Karen, since we've had these conversations before. Oh, you muted.
I know I muted myself. So, but they're really only applying for one category, correct?
Yeah, and one, even though they might do other programs that do that.
They have to choose which category under which they are applying.
Right.
So I think in the case of if someone applies, I'll say under food and nutrition, and they are not the activities for which they are asking for funding, if those activities don't match up with either one of these, increasing food delivery options or increasing fresh food options, then they would get no points, for the weight. So if they were doing
So you all don't reassess to see like, okay, maybe they're not increasing food delivery options, but something is around like, I don't know. I guess there's probably not a whole lot of other.
Yeah, that's probably. But
that's probably not a good example. But
I know.
I'm just wondering if there's one where they put it under one thing, but then when we actually look at those specifics, it would really fit under something different. Would we give them those points, or do we do it based on like, do they fit one of the things that fits in there in that category that they applied for?
So really the only thing that we have moved is as Eliberto said, is the main category. So, and I think it's really about if they are offering, if the activity that they want to fund or the program that they want to fund is not in the category in which they're asking for, they just don't get the weighted points for that.
Got it. Okay, that helps. Thank you.
They'll get other points, but they won't get, and because this is really linked to the priorities that were identified in the needs assessment. So if they said, so like we're gonna provide box mac and cheese to everyone. I don't know, so that might not fall into the the fresh fruit option or whatever, and they might get no points.
So in increasing access to processed food, if that's not
right
one of the priorities, then that's not gonna.
They would get no points.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, I guess probably like the health and well-being is a good example of like, there's so many things that you could do in health and well-being, but they may not be among the priority areas that we've identified.
Right, and that they wouldn't get 25 points for that weight.
Got it.
Because it's not what the community said they needed in the needs assessment.
Yeah. And this just again to reiterate, particularly for our new members, this is really intended as a framework to make hard decisions. Because if we don't have a rule set of some kind, then every agency becomes the buying a puppy problem, because they're all really cute. And so you got to say yes to every puppy you ever see, but at some point we can only have so many puppies in the house. And the rule set is derived from the needs assessment, which is what I really like about it. It's taking the data that somebody took all that time to gather and say, okay, how do we integrate that into our decision making? Which means it'll still be imperfect.
Correct. And we will deliberate and have conversations about it when the time comes.
Yes.
So with those two important things to note, I'm going to go into the formula changes because they have changed in my mind drastically from last year. So last year we had tons of weighted points. This year we don't. So the simplest way I can put this, because I've thought about this quite a bit, is the biggest difference is instead of going off how many total points, because in 2019, what I did was something even more radical than this. It made it impossible for anybody to get 100% of their requests. basically for 2021, if an agency averages a score of 4 for all the questions that this board has and all the questions that we as staff has, and then receives their total weighted score or the weights for their priority, then they will get 100%. And so I started with 100%, and then I just went 5 down. What I didn't do, and I'm thinking about that now, is what's the average score you get to not get funding? Basically, what I did is I went 5. I just started 5 down. So at 95 is if you got in housing, would be if you got an average of 4 from us, from all of us, board and staff, and you got the 35 points. That would give you the what's it called? The 100% funding. Does that make sense?
I was trying to help you there. I just didn't know where you were going. Sorry.
Well, I struggled a lot with something, Karen. I was struggling a lot, and actually, that decision to just give them all the points if they're doing any of the activity, that was super helpful to me. But then I still had to figure out, so what gives you 100% of funding? Because in 2019, I said you had to have a perfect score.
And we changed that because that wasn't realistic. Yeah.
So nobody gets a perfect score. Right. And so this year I said, okay, if they get an average of 4, that gets them 100% of
their request.
Of their request.
Yet they can't exceed 50% of the total amount available for that.
Right. Right. With the caveat that you can't exceed your individual agency priority limit. But that's how this works. And that's how it works for every one of the priorities. So in 2020, I kept changing around. I never went below 100. And so the ranges would shift based on how much scores they could get. But this year, I started with what is 100%, and then I modified everything by 5 downwards. So each priority area has a different lower level threshold. Because I started, instead of starting with the bottom, which I did, I started with the top and went downwards. So I think you can see this is, I can't see because I see here.
Self-sufficiency.
All right, self-sufficiency.
Mm-hmm.
You can see those ranges.
Education.
Education. They get less points, so they need to, what doesn't change how much they can get from you and from us, from board and staff. The only thing that changes is what they can get as far as their weighted points. Yes, Caitlin.
So it's late. My math may be a little off here. That based on those like weights that you were showing us before of the like 35 points for housing stability, for example, all the way down to, I think, safety and justice was an additional 10 points. It says to me, though, that like someone has to get the weighted score, has to get that weighting. They have to meet one of those for housing stability, self-sufficiency, education and skill building, for everything except for safety and justice. So like safety and justice, somebody doesn't have to meet one of those priority areas, but if they're really good, they'll hit that 59. Like they don't need that like weighted piece. Whereas with the other ones, they're going to have it to hit that 50% mark. So the scales are not like, the scales are even between each other, but they aren't like relative to how much that weighting gets. And we've said that housing stability, for example, and self-sufficiency are higher priorities. And so I hate to think that like we're going to drop some folks with this scoring method because they don't meet those, even if they still fit like housing stability. like maybe they're not hitting one of those top like 5 priority areas for housing stability, but they're still hitting housing stability in some way, which.
Well, housing stability only has two activities.
Yeah. So if they're doing something other than those 2, but they're providing housing stability, they like essentially we're saying they can't even meet that 50% threshold.
Right.
Whereas with safety and justice, if they're not doing one of those like 5 activities, they could still meet that minimum threshold to get 50%. And that seems inverted to me.
Okay.
In terms of priority.
I could, yeah, I guess I could just tighten that one up to meet it, so they wouldn't get it.
So, that's a really good point, Caitlin. If I can try to reason through this, originally the weighted values were kind of like a bonus for hitting certain things were identified in the needs assessment as important for this coming term. And I guess with the fact that now you don't, now that you get the 35, right? If you meet any one of those, any one of the 2 in this case, or maybe self-sufficiency and resilience, there's 5. If you hit any one of those 5, you get the 30, which increases your probability you're going to get the 30. But on housing and stability, you have a pretty tight window you have to hit to get the 35. Oh man, this is like a Vegas issue.
Well, but part of it is, Brian, that housing stability is pretty specific.
Yeah.
So you're either providing some type of housing, because it's in there, you're providing some type of transitional emergency housing, or you're providing some type of rent or utility support.
I guess practically speaking, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your hand, Caitlin, and usurp your line in the thing, but practically speaking, how many housing stability applications actually don't meet one of those? I mean, can we think of a case where there's an important project that's not meeting one of those 2 activities?
So I'm looking at because I had the list right with me. So we have 3 agencies that are applying under housing stability. And so that is EFA that provides housing, In Between that provides housing, and Safe Shelter that provides housing. So they all meet.
We'll get those points.
Yeah.
What about attention homes? Is that part of it? Or am I missing this list?
They're applying under health and well-being. It's okay.
They're applying under education and skill building.
So they're not applying for their apartments, or I think they're applying for a different they're applying.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
It shows housing stability on the one we got in the board packet, just for attention homes.
They have 2 programs, so I'm not sure if they.
It's under self-sufficiency and resilience and education and skill building. At least what I have on the schedule. Okay. But we'll double check those things.
Okay. Yeah. I was just going to say, like, the list of activities for housing stability, I think it's actually supposed to be 3 instead of 2. I see 2 in the first cell. Increasing rent subsidies due to COVID-related income loss and providing temporary transitional housing. I think those are 2 separate activities, right?
We could, yeah. I could change. I could separate those.
Yeah. I think that they do seem like separate activities to me, and I don't think it changes the map.
No, you still, yeah. But and the only thing, Brian, that I would clarify is that I think you talked about it being a bonus, and which I appreciate. And the one score that we are assigning, the board and the staff, really has to do the quality of the application and the quality of the agency in its management. And this weighted score is really about their the program that they are applying for is really something that the community said it needs.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call it I'm wordsmith. I wouldn't call it a bonus. So it's really linked to, are you providing a service that the community needs? Are you providing a service that's nice to have, but it's not the most compelling need that we have in our community?
Right. Well, again, it goes back to the human services needs assessment. Are you providing a service that the board using the housing service, the human services needs assessment has decided is a priority, right? And we've prioritized the priority areas.
Yeah. Karen, that was the nicest correction I've had all day.
So Caitlin still had a question.
Not necessarily a question, sorry. I'm just wondering if if it's really like we've identified these as our priorities, we've already sort of used the percentages of the amount of money that we have and like the agency limits to do this. I'm wondering if there's a reason we couldn't say, rather than having different like scoring scales for each priority area, just saying that like if you have to have at least an average of a 4 to get 50%, and then from there, if you meet one of these, you could then you get the weighted. So basically, like rather than it being 5 down or something, it's like sort of the minimum is that you have an average of a certain score, and then this bonus does put you into like that 75 or that 100% area to get what you've requested. You have to meet one of these things, because we've identified these as a priority area rather than using like specific numbers that are different across them, because that feels confusing to me to use 35 for housing stability versus 30. If you're meeting one of the activities that we identified in each of these areas, then the other limits that we've put in terms of the amount of money, and that seems to help. Because if we're not comparing across, I don't understand why we would use different points if we're not comparing across categories.
I think that's a valid question, because the points being different would tend to suggest housing instability being the highest priority, you get more points relative to safety and justice. But if the points are really serving to move applications within a category, not across categories, up or down, then I think it's true that it may be possible to simplify it, Alberto, by just saying like it's 20 points, right? If you meet the priority activities, not just the area, but the activities. This would be in the interest of simplifying, which, given the fact that you have your head back and your mouth kind of screwed.
Well, no, I'm just thinking. I'm just. It's late at night, and I'm thinking through that. What does it look like? I mean, the reason we do these scoring ranges is because it takes the human. We're trying to take the human factor out of it. I've been on many different grant committees where there's a lot of human factor in it, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But we were trying to make it to minimize that as much as possible. And so I'm just
at least on the weighting. So obviously we are all evaluating the applications because we're all giving you scores and we have guidance, but we might have different opinions about whether something is a 3 or a 4 in certain areas. But I think the weighting matrix is, are you providing a service that this community said it needs, and the higher the priority of the service, the more points that you will get.
So I would maybe just suggest that, Alberto, if you can give that some thought in terms of what is the function of that weight. Mm-hmm. And if there's a way to simplify it, like Caitlin was suggesting, great. If not, if it seems like that's going to throw a wrench in it, as long as we have confidence that the mechanism is adequately ordering applications by their efficiency and success, then, I certainly feel like I trust your approach on that.
What would be really helpful, Caitlin, is if you can send me an email with your idea spelled out so they can help me, put something together. That would be really helpful. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, do you mind sending out a copy of the actual Excel spreadsheet? I think we got like a printout of it in a PDF, but if you could send the actual Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, I can send you that.
Great, thanks.
Great. And thank you, Caitlin, for your thoughts on that. It's really helpful to talk that through.
So that's my presentation. And so we got direction, and we'll get some more support from the board to try and simplify it as much as possible. So
Alberto, do you want to stop sharing?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
So that sounds great. If you take a look at that, see if there's a way to simplify it, because you have changed the rules a little bit. And again, this is a directional framework intended to help us have rational thinking behind our decisions. So I do want to maybe just reassert that it will be imperfect, as any directional tool is, but I think in the imperfection is where the humanity comes in our decisions. So it's not all just mechanical. All right, thank you, Alberto. Is there anything else we can provide for you that would be helpful?
No, that's great. I appreciate the board's direction tonight, and I will try and I'll send it to Caitlin, and then for our next meeting, I'll try and get something to the board.
Great. Okay. That leaves us with the site visit updates. Just to be clear, board member Marsing has resigned, if I'm not mistaken. So he will not be giving a bridge.
I don't know if he sent that out to I don't know if he sent it out to everybody. I think he just sent it out to you, Brian, and to staff. So maybe you want to just talk about that.
Sure. I apologize. I thought that he did send it to everybody. And so.
Well, I don't know if he did, but the email that we got did not have the full board on it.
Okay. So due to the fact that Jake is likely moving to Thornton, as well as the workload from his master's program, he feels like he just can't give the board the attention that it deserves. So he has submitted his resignation, and that'll be, I guess, a process of filling that staff will.
And he made that effective immediately. And I imagine he did that because we are recruiting applications for the advisory board, and the city clerk's office did extend that to the 20th of November. The deadline was the 6th. And so they extended it for 2 more weeks. So
thank you. So he did mention that he wanted to try to get that replacement in the cycle. Councilmember Christensen?
He's also moving to Thornton, so technically, he can't serve.
Yeah.
That's too bad, but he'll be happy, so that's good.
Yeah. Well, and I tend to believe that he actually resigned because he didn't want to have to attend the virtual hearings. It was just entirely selfish. So we will not get a bridge to justice unless Diana, go ahead.
Just from a procedural question, based on that resignation, do we need to appoint a new co-chair, or since he was
he was the vice chair, that is true.
I would say that unless, Brian, if you flake out on us, then probably we are, because we elect new officers at the January meeting. So you certainly could appoint someone for the next month and a half, or hope that Brian doesn't flake out on us and stay strong. So it's really up to you, but we would be electing new officers in January.
Is this an appointment? Is the replacement an appointment, or is it an election?
For the
if we did a replacement for a month and a half?
We would just have to elect, we have to elect them.
So board members
Yeah.
vote on that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was
So
wondering.
it's up to you.
Well, I certainly would open up the opportunity if anybody wants to take that role, to do so. I mean, I would think that that would actually be a natural transition into next year as well. So I am, unreliable. So it may in fact be really important that we have somebody. Of you good people, Councilmember Christensen?
I just wanted to let everybody know that City Council will be doing board interviews on the 5th of December. And I believe we vote on them the following week or two. So we'll have some new board members then too.
Okay, all right. If you have an interest, please let me know directly or let Eliberto and Karen know. I don't want to shoehorn somebody in because for no good reason. I don't want to force anybody, but I do want to encourage you to step forward if you have an interest in serving. It's not it's not like an ego thing to say, yes, I would like to serve. Nobody's going to think you're power hungry. Madeline?
Is the floor open for nominations right now?
I think so, yeah. Let's make it open.
Okay. I nominate Caitlin.
Okay. Caitlin, do you accept this nomination?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, that was easy.
Well, thank you, Madeline. So all in favor of electing Caitlin to serve the remainder of board member Marsing's term as vice chair? Well, I guess we need a motion, right?
Well, why don't you get a second?
Right. So Madeline made the motion. Is there a second? Shakita gives a second. So all in favor of having Caitlin, whatever I said. Please raise your hand. All right. Congratulations, Caitlin. It is unanimous.
Easiest election ever?
Well, I wouldn't say so. I mean, there was a lot of hemming and hawing there about getting anybody to the thing. So. Well, that's great. So now I can feel good if I just don't feel like attending one of these that you've done. Actually, this is helpful because particularly with the virtual hearings, the timing on those, it can be kind of funky sometimes. So having somebody to fill in if I can't make it is really helpful.
Yeah, that's good.
So thank you, Caitlin, for accepting the nomination, and thank you, Madeline, for the nomination.
Absolutely. One other question for those persons, if there is someone interested in applying for this board, so let me make sure I got my notes right. They should apply by November 20th. And the way to do that is to go on the website under boards and commissions and find Housing and Human Services Advisory Board and fill out the application. Is that correct?
That is correct. So, and the application is not necessarily directly under the Housing and Human Service. It's under the city clerks. But you go to the boards and commissions and you'll see where it's how do I apply.
Okay.
So it's, yeah.
All right.
By the 20th. Yep.
All right. And I also take it that we're going to wait until after the first of the year to update our website with the things that we talked about updating it with, pictures and bios and all of that. Correct?
And I think it still would be good, Madeline, if we had a chance, if we don't run out of time, to really discuss, what we would want to include, and then we can get the, Nicole can work on getting the information together. So it would be nice if we can briefly talk about that.
Okay.
After the site visit updates.
Okay. Oh, okay, great.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and move on. So we'll quickly move through this site visit updates. Certainly feel free to contribute as much information as you want. I also would encourage anybody updating that don't feel the need to draw out any visit information because you're concerned that if you don't, it sounds like you didn't actually visit the site. We have full trust that you visited and gained valuable information. So with that, Board Member Yarbrough will give us an update on the Blue Sky Bridge.
Yeah, I actually did not visit the site, but but I did speak with the ED along with Eliberto, and of course this was right at the beginning of COVID. Isn't that right, Eliberto? Yeah, right at the beginning. So I could not find my notes, but I don't remember everything. The ED, Gina Earls, I think her name is, she was very good. It's a child advocacy program for kids who have been abused, child abuse. One of the things I really did like about the organization is that they had education program, and they would go to the schools for like kindergartens, everything. It's a preventative education program for kids to be able to speak up about being touched inappropriately, or just about being a victim, or just to stand up for themselves and be confident. I guess the only thing that it seemed like a really good program, she actually was going to Cornell, taking a class at Cornell for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We talked about how her board had the lack of diversity, and she said it was a big struggle. So that's why she was taking that class. And I told her, well, taking that class won't mean that that people are just gonna fly in there on your board just because you're taking a class at Cornell on DEI. But anyway, she was really nice, and we didn't take a virtual tour or anything. But yeah, I like the education part. They do have a few therapists that are bilingual. She did mention like they didn't have very many clients that were clients of color. So she felt like the way she kind of insinuated was that because since they didn't have very many clients that were clients of color, that they really didn't need that many people on their board to have people of color. So I had to say what I had to say, but she was nice, and Eliberto just brought up something about their policies or something like that. But other than that, I guess their financials were all intact, and so it was pretty good.
So I do have an update because this happened before the mid-year report, and I was like, when Suki and I talked before, and I don't remember, like she said, my notes were primarily around really technical stuff that I don't know if the board wants to go into, because they have a lot of national or federal guidelines. It was hard to find all of their stuff in one place because they have stuff for their providers and they have stuff for their general staff. It was just confusing. So that was my main conversation with her. But I do have an update from their mid-year report, and like a lot of agencies, they talk about the challenges. Some of the challenges they're seeing is financially, is that they're expecting an overall decrease in funding, but they're more concerned about 2021, which is something I've heard from a lot of agencies. So they're not the only ones. And of course, it's been a great challenge going from a lot of these were in-person interviews that they would have with the kiddos. And now because of COVID, it has been a challenge to go to that teleforensic interview that they do. So now they need staff not only to just do the interview, but they need somebody to help provide the tech support along with that. So those are some of the challenges they faced because of COVID that didn't come out in our, because again, it was very early on, but it came out in their mid-year report.
Yes, Anne. You're on mute, Anne.
Did they say they had 2 bilingual therapists?
I think so. Yeah. When we were there, they said.
But they don't need a bilingual board member.
I think that I think she said her main concern, not really concern, but the way she was advocating as to why they didn't have people of color on their board. She said it was really hard to find people of color. And I said, well, I don't really know where you're looking because they're here. And I said, you just got to find people who have an interest in what you do. There are many people who have an interest in advocating for kids, who have been abused and who are victims. So she was really sweet. It seemed like she was a nice lady, but she had excuses. And but it's really, that's what we hear with nonprofits anyway, that it's really hard to get people of color on their boards. But when you have that type of mentality that the people that we serve are not people of color, then why would I want to be on your board, right? So where are those diverse perspectives? And that's what I talked to her about. So I think that a lot of times if you have a few people of color that are on your staff, then you feel like you're in good shape, So Madeline, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I was just thinking that this has been a historical issue for the nonprofits, for the ones that have come before us. I mean, I can go back 8 years, and last year we decided that we would issue penalties. I don't think we ever came up with the exact penalty. I think we said we would give notice before these hearings, before this period, before 2021. But I don't know that we ever did. So I'm just thinking that after the reports, Brian and Karen, if it's okay, and we want to take a couple of minutes to just revisit the consequences for inaction, if that's okay.
So let's, I certainly think it's valuable to have that discussion. I don't want to run too late into the evening. So Karen, remind me, the discussion you wanted to have, make sure we had before we adjourn is, can you remind me what, and you're on mute.
Thank you. Well, I'm just looking at what the agenda is, and so there was, so after the site visits, then there is about giving some input about what to include on the advisory board webpage for information in terms of bios or how we want to collect that. So.
Okay, but you had a different agenda item as well that you wanted to make sure.
No, that was it. That was it.
That was it. Okay.
Right.
So
and
yes.
I think it, Madeline, to your point, I think we just basically said it should be reflected in the scores that you're giving the agencies. So if you hear, because we have a question around equity and inclusion, and so if there's history with the agencies of not following through on commitments, if you're not seeing action, then it should show up in how you score the agency on that particular dimension, and it should impact their overall score. So
Okay,
that's what we talked about we would do,
Yeah, I remember now. We
Yeah.
did say that.
Yeah.
We also did say we would make it a point to let them know that we would
can
be
give that
focusing
feedback
in that
too.
area.
Yep.
Mhm. Okay. All right.
And so on that, just on that point, I think there's some onus on all of us then to agree that that is going to be a factor that will result in a lower score, not that some of us are scoring, including it, and some of us aren't.
Yeah.
Right, that is one of the key components that will be scored.
Great. That'll make an impact, I think. At least to start. At least to start.
Graham?
I think we're supposed to assess program level stuff, and staff is supposed to assess,
Yes, you're right.
board stuff. So I'm trying to think of which question we would score on that, and maybe it's, do they address inequalities? I can't think of any other question that would remotely allow us to score based on that.
Yeah, you're right, because it's something that Eliberto and I are supposed to score on.
Okay.
So
that being said, I agree with
so
Graham.
we need to do our job, Eliberto.
Yeah, well, I do it, but I do agree with Graham that if it's something that the board wants to take into account, I mean, we do
Put
have
it in your comments.
equities, and so I think that's where that question could be influenced by that, the idea or of their work and commitment to DEI work.
Okay. Caitlin and then Anne. I know, Caitlin, you had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if that's something that like staff, it's included in sort of staff's evaluation, that seems perhaps more helpful in the sense that I don't know that we've heard enough. We haven't heard something about every one of the organizations that we're evaluating. So really, like as a board member, I only have what's in the application really to compare against. So I don't know if we've brought up to them before that their board is not diverse or those types of things. And so I think having that be something that is included as part of staff's evaluation seems more logical, because it's more of a long-term versus evaluating the specific application. And that seems more suitable for staff to be looking at over the, year over year for that.
Thank you.
I would think, I'm sorry, unless they're new applicants, it is something that they all have heard repeatedly.
Yeah. So that I think there's opportunities. Certainly, it sounds like the primary focus is staff. However, there's opportunities for the board. We just need to be consistent, even within each, individually. And I know you've been waiting. So
I was just going to say the same thing, that, I think Karen certainly knows from all the years, all the many decades she's been in her job, who the biggest offenders are. I mean, pretty much everyone is, but I just think it would be good for you to do it, or you all to do it, because you've kept track of it more. And Madeline, you're right, it's pretty much every agency, not every, but, and they recruit for all kinds of other things. So it's just a very lame excuse.
Yeah. Now to a couple of their credits, I did see some changes when I went through, and I'm just beginning my evaluation, so haven't gotten very far, but I did see some changes in the demographics of a couple of those organizations. And I am optimistic that as I go through them, I'll see more. But you're absolutely right. Everybody that spoke, couldn't agree more.
great. Karen, did you have something you wanted to add? Okay, Karen Phillips, go ahead. You're on mute as well, Karen Phillips.
Thank you. I just think that question number 6 has to deal with that a little bit, or maybe I'm misinterpreting that number 6 question about, did the agency describe the historical inequities its program is designed to address and the strategies used to utilize them? So I kind of think that number 6 was addressing that a little bit, but maybe I'm not getting that question understood very correctly.
Well, I mean, the question is, like to Caitlin's point, is much more about the programs. That doesn't mean that other aspects of the program, including leadership, doesn't impact that or influence that. But it is very much centered on what the program has done or meant to do.
It does seem like a program heavy question. Karen?
Yeah, and I think, so that's what you're scoring on in the program. And then what Eliberto and I are scoring on is really about their board composition and their staff composition. And so how their staff and board really represent the clients that they, so I think I would say that between the question the board is answering around diversity and equity and inclusion and what the staff is doing, I think we'll have a pretty good assessment of how the agencies are progressing or not in that area.
Great. Okay, let's go ahead then and move on to the Intercambio de Comunidades update by board member Baldwin, and I apologize for my horrible Spanish.
That was pretty bad. So I'm going to do this really quickly because I know we have other things to talk about, and it was a long time ago, so I don't remember everything. But they have 20 classes a week, which I thought was kind of amazing. They had 400 people in their program. So it's a program where this agency helps teach people English. And they have different levels, 6 levels of English classes. They do evaluations for each level. So it's very organized. And right now they're doing them from home. They have online classes, morning and evening classes. They use a national curriculum. They have 150 to 160 students. They have books that they give them, and that's what they kind of work off of. They do have to pay for the program, but they do have scholarships. The age range is 25 to 82. And anyone from any country can take this class. So what else did I want to say? They have 16 employees and 100 volunteers. So it's a pretty robust agency, actually. I thought it was much smaller than it was, but it's quite large. And I was really excited about it and excited about talking about it after I did the virtual visit, but now I can't remember all of the things. To be honest. Eliberto, I don't know if you wanted, I was impressed. I was really impressed.
To add to the conversation before that we have just had, they do have some diverse board members, but they've also created an equity team within the board. And they've created a new equity grievance form, which is different from, they've always had like a kind of a complaint website, but now they've created an equity grievance form as well. Now I know from the mid-year report, they don't have 16 staff anymore. They have laid off a few people based on COVID and lack of funding, but they are working to be as adaptable as possible to the pandemic. So I guess those are my.
I guess people's priorities are surviving right now, like everyone.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Anne. Okay, how about the HOPE site visit update from board member Blair?
Yeah, so I did this in August, which really doesn't seem like that long ago, but a lot has happened since August, and I'm trying to remember and read my handwriting. But as an initial note, did they apply for funding this year? Am I crazy? I didn't see that they were on the list. I went to double check their application.
So they apply with a different process. They apply through a separate RFP, a request for proposal for homeless services.
Okay. Because one of the things I wanted to double check was the application and the diversity that's reflected in the application, and I couldn't find it. So I wasn't sure about that. We did have so let me step back and say, just summary, probably everybody knows what HOPE is, but essentially it's homeless outreach. And they have several programs that they undertake, including they run a shelter, they do outreach to the community. When I had met with them, they had just started doing the Safe Lot program, which is a new program where they have a parking lot that people can basically reside in their vehicles. And so we talked a lot about that program because it was new or relatively new when I met with them in August, and how that was going. We talked about their staff and how staff is selected, and that a significant number of their staff are people that used to use their services or were volunteers through them. But I didn't ask enough questions about diversity on the board. So that's something I should have been more thorough about, for sure.
It's on my notes. I did ask. I just didn't write down what they said.
That I had some recollection that we talked about it, and I have like 4 pages of notes, but I can't. So I'm like, well, it must have either been okay enough that I didn't feel the need to write it down, or I just screwed up.
Yeah, it was on my notes to ask them, but I don't remember what they said. I just so you all know, I am a liaison to that board. So I attend the board meetings for a short period of time. I can't be there for the whole board meeting. And it's pretty white. I mean, there's no other way to put it. That being said, at least on the board, there are people who have experienced homelessness, and I think that's another part of diversity that I think is important, and is to have people who have either used or experienced a situation on the board. So that I'll give them credit for that. I think that's important, that they have people who have used the services or experienced the situation.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto. Anything else, Diana?
I think the only other thing I would note that I thought was interesting from meeting with them is that they gave me some statistics for last year that people that had come through navigation that are now in housing, 60 to 61 people, I think they said, secured housing by using their services, which is not insignificant. And I thought was a really nice statistic to have, that there are people that have a place to sleep at night because of this organization. Is important work. So
yeah, that's really awesome. Thank you.
That's all.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the agenda item 7, which is about including advisory board member bios on the city website. Karen, you going to lead that?
Or Madeline. So, I think
I'm going to jump off because I'm not going to be part of this. Because because I'm not going to be here next year, not because I don't agree with it.
You're not going to be party to this kind of discussion.
See everyone soon.
Thanks, Ann. See you.
So, because I realize it's after 9, so it might be, maybe we just want to pick this up back in December, or maybe what we want to do is to send out some information and staff. Madeline serves on the committee that's a Longmont Multicultural Action Committee, and we went through this effort, and so maybe what would be helpful is that we just write up what our approach was for that particular committee to really provide some information. So basically, in essence, we asked each board member to write responses to just less than a handful of questions. So something to the effect of, how long you've been on the board, and then to really talk about why you joined up and what has been some of the the most significant meaning for serving on that board. So so there's really maybe just 3 questions, I think, Madeline, if I'm answering that correctly. So why'd you sign up? what do you do on the board? Why is it important? And what keeps you coming back? Why you what is meaningful about your participation?
Karen,
So,
I'm sorry, can I just ask that we do this? I mean, I color me a radical, but Madeline's been, after
Right.
this for some time, I think, and
right. So I guess the question is, if we put together a questionnaire, we'll send it out. You respond. We'll do photo. If it's really, so if you're okay with that, we will move forward.
Yeah, I think it'd be easier if people would just send pictures. If you guys have headshots, I think that just make easier.
okay. Is there anybody that is opposed to this? I don't see. Okay, let's do it.
There is a board that I have just joined that I think they have an excellent website, and they've done this, and that's the Longmont Community Foundation. And they have very brief bios, and they have photos, and it's really, really nice. Of course, it was pre-pandemic that they were able to put the photos out, so they went to a professional. But the picture I know that I submitted was not professional, but they were able to get it in and make it look okay. So you may want to check that out and maybe use that as a model.
We'll just move forward.
In all honesty, I'm on that board too, and Eric had to chase me down for my bio, so
mine is out. Mine's on there.
It took a while to get mine. So just say it.
All right, that's awesome. So we're going to get it done.
Move forward. Yep.
And I'm going to ask Putin to use his deepfake technology to put my face on Captain America's body for my photo. It'll be indistinguishable from any.
We'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
Can I put my head on Xena the warrior princess or something?
All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you for hanging in there with us on a longer meeting than I think we had initially thought we were going to have. Real quick, is there any other business?
And then we come back together Saturday for our 9:00 show.
Yes, I will send you guys the reminder tomorrow. I just didn't want to send it tonight and get you all goofed up with tonight's meeting and Saturday's meeting. So you'll get it from me tomorrow.
Thank you. I apologize for not being there Monday. I am actually in Nashville, Tennessee. So, but I will be there Saturday.
Great.
All right.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Thanks, Caitlin. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You too. Good night.
Good night.
Bye.